This first clip is from Joe Biden, and he's discussing, this was just yesterday, he's discussing the idea of socialism and communism. And let's just be realistic, right? Any way we have ever seen conservatives describe it in the past, any action of the government giving out money of any kind has been labeled socialism, right? So Joe Biden is, in one sentence, deriding socialism, but then in another sentence, he's signing legislation that is actually delivering money to the people. So let's take a look at the clip.
Well, let me start off by answering the question relative to Haiti and Cuba. And communism is a failed system, universally failed system. And I don't see socialism as a very useful substitute, but that's another story.
I want to start with you, Anthony. What are your thoughts about this framing that he had, all things considered, when we put it in a historical perspective?
There are communist and socialist representatives in parliaments across the world, and they actually are putting forward legislation, working as functional parts of governments, right? And so oftentimes what happens is somebody will make, in the United States, we make a statement towards communist regimes that were heading states that led to very problematic things. I will offer, that we have examples of many different governmental structures that have been heads of state, that have been heads of regimes of countries that have failed and been responsible for huge atrocities. Capitalist systems shouldn't be left off of that table. And so I think there's some parsing that needs to happen in that regard. Remember that we went through a whole stretch of being able to label and then blacklist people because of affiliation for communism and socialism and things like that. That those talking points are very similar. I want to be clear that payments to people have been something that the government has done over and over again, and we seem to not have an issue when those payments go to, for example, Southern planters or former Confederate leaders. But we have a huge issue when they go to poor people, when they go to people who are in need and marginalized.
And we do know the nuances. We do have the complexities. We do understand at a very nuanced level. We got it. We got it, Joe Biden. We got it, Fox News. We get it. But we're talking about survival. People need these kind of checks because we've been living paycheck to paycheck forever.
Aren't these payments, if I'm not mistaken, isn't this the child tax credit stuff?
It is.
So which means
Go ahead.
I ain't gonna get a damn thing, and I'm still broke as hell. Still working this 9 to 5. Still not making enough money to cover rent.
That's it.
Pay car note, utilities, anything else. So it is good for those families, and I mean it does help. But I mean, gotta look at the rest of the country because we're still gonna be in poverty.
But the level of poverty and struggle that is happening in our cities is too deep for any church to fix on their own. It requires an institution that is large enough, and oh, by the way, that takes taxpayer dollars from us every single check. I don't care how poor you are. If you receive a check, you pay in taxes. Should we not have the expectation of our government that they should do something for us, especially when they're taking taxes out of our check?
Essentially, that's what we're paying in for, and not just out of our taxes, but property taxes. I mean, there's taxes on everything. And so we're paying that money out in good faith that the government is taking this big pool of money to create opportunities for the greater good. And I think when you look at people who are most vulnerable, it serves us all to know that the people who are most vulnerable have their basic necessities taken care of. And so when the government is not making that a priority, when the government is not looking at people who are making minimum wage, and that does not equate to being able to pay rent in a livable place, there definitely should be some compensation. There should be some type of a stipend that should be issued so that people can have their basic needs met. And why not use tax dollars to pay for that?
If we want to talk about socialism, I'm sorry, this you bringing the AME kids studying under these powerful women, at least in my region, who are teaching me theologically. You want to talk about socialism, then you are going to be in a complicated conversation when you talk about feeding the 5,000. Right.
Capitalism does not equal democracy. You can love democracy and see how problematic capitalism is. So Joe Biden, I'm sorry, that playbook from what year was the McCarthy trials? That's not going to fly. Not in the year of our Lord 2021. Not with black folks.
We venerate across the United States free breakfast and lunch programs for saving young kids in poverty and all of that. We owe that to a group of folks, the Black Panther Party, who use socialist tenets to feed children and feed children from many different backgrounds. That gets kind of pulled out. They fed everybody, and that was picked up because why? We appreciate that tenet. So there's a conflation there happening, and we are also not without resource. If you look at that pie chart that often comes on the screen about where we spend our dollars, what's the biggest part of that chart? We're talking about the smallest sliver of that chart.
We got money for war, but not to feed the poor.
Oh, you sounded like